From freak accidents on film sets to defining moments in American history. Welcome to the gruesome moments in live television, Iceberg. If you don't know what an iceberg chart is, well, I don't know how you don't at this point. It's a way of sorting information around a specific topic, usually from most known to least known. So as we descend the iceberg, topics that are less known will start to appear. The entries on this iceberg have been ranked by obscurity, and if you really want to see them, most of the videos are online, but watch at your own risk. So now that you're caught up, let's get into layer 1 of the iceberg. Bud Dwyer Incident. Bud Dwyer was an American Republican member of Pennsylvania State Senate. He worked for the Senate from 1971 to 1981, and then became the state treasurer from 1981 till 1987. Now, in the early 80s, Pennsylvania officials discovered that some state workers overpaid federal taxes by millions of dollars. This was due to errors in state withholding prior to Dwyer's administration. An investigation was launched and the employees that overpaid were compensated. However, officials received an anonymous memo describing allegations of bribery, and Bud Dwyer was named within the memo. Just 1 year later, in 1987, Dwyer was found guilty on 11 counts of conspiracy, mail fraud, perjury and racketeering. Throughout the trial, Dwyer consistently claimed his innocence. He was scheduled to be sentenced on January 23rd, but just 1 day before, on the 22nd, Dwyer was calling for a press conference regarding these charges. Dwyer consistently pushed for the press conference to take place at his own house, but this didn't happen as it ended up taking place in the Pennsylvania State Building in Harrisburg. Midway through the conference, Dwyer said he was going to die in office and his death should be used as an example. He then withdrew a revolver from an envelope midway through the conference and warned people to please leave this room if this will affect you. Dwyer then put the gun to the roof of his mouth and pulled the trigger. This event was filmed by 9 different news cameras around the room. It wasn't until 2010 that Dwyer was proven innocent when a former chairman admitted to lying about a treasurer taking bribes, where he falsely named Dwyer instead of his wife to avoid her being charged. Every aspect of Dwyer's death was quite tragic, as he was an honest man who was wrongly accused. John F. Kennedy murder. I'm sure you already all know this, but John F. Kennedy was the 35th President of the United States of America. On November 21st, 1963, he rode in a motorcade through Dallas, Texas. He was there for 2 days, visiting 5 different cities around Texas for a fundraising trip. At 12:30 a.m., JFK's car turned southwest onto Elm Street, moving through Dealey Plaza in Dallas. Whilst riding through and waving at the crowds of people on either side of the road, JFK was then shot from behind, with the first bullet going through his throat and his neck, and the second going in the back of his head. A large chunk of JFK's head was actually blown off by the shot. His wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, was sitting next to him at the time of this, and it's believed that when she started rummaging around inside the car after the shooting, that she was trying to pick up pieces of his head. She probably acted this way from extreme shock in the situation. His killer was Lee Harvey Oswald, a 24-year-old man who was in the military but had defected to join the Soviet Union and who embraced Marxism. He had positioned himself on the 6th floor of a Texas school book depository, waiting for when JFK would drive past in the motorcade. Oswald used an Italian Carcano M91 38 bolt-action rifle to shoot Kennedy. This was easily one of the biggest events in American history. This event also has a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding it. Just on the Wikipedia page alone, there are 14 different conspiracy theories listed. Due to the time period of this event, only one person managed to film the assassination. His name was Abraham Zapruder. He happened to be filming the car at the right moment on his Bell & Howell home movie camera. Hence it became known as the Zapruder film, and is one of the most studied pieces of film in history. Ayrton Senna crash. Ayrton Senna was a 34-year-old Brazilian racing driver. He was born on the 21st of March 1960 in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He had previously won 3 F1 championships, one in 1988, one in 1990, and then one in 1991, so he had quite a successful career. Senna was racing at the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, which was hosted at the Autodromo Enzo e Dino Ferrari in Italy. The date was the 1st of May, where just the previous day before, an Austrian driver, named Roland Ratzenberger, died in a crash during qualification for the race. After the race had begun, Senna was doing fine. This was until lap 7, when Senna took a straight line straight off the track into a concrete barrier. It's believed that a tyre puncture caused Senna to lose control of the car. Before the race, driver JJ Leto had crashed his car, causing there to be debris left over on the tracks, which is believed to have caused the puncture. Senna had hit the concrete barrier, going 131 miles per hour at a shallow angle. His car then bounced off the barrier and span to a halt. From the footage recorded, you can see Senna going motionless straight after the crash for around 10 seconds. He then slightly shifts his head before going limp. Senna suffered multiple severe injuries, including fatal skull fractures, large wounds from debris, and a damaged superficial temporal artery. At first glance, you could see Senna was injured due to his helmet being penetrated by a large piece of metal. It's believed that Senna died after the impact due to huge amounts of brain trauma suffered, but he wasn't pronounced dead until 6:40 that day. The Challenger Space Shuttle disaster. The Challenger was set to launch the 28th of January 1986. The main goal of this mission was to deploy a tracking and data relay satellite named TDRS-B. This satellite was part of a constellation of satellites that would have allowed communication with orbiting spacecraft. The Challenger also carried the Spartan Haley spacecraft, a small satellite meant to be released in space then picked up 2 days after, which was observing Halley's Comet. The launch of the Challenger was initially postponed for several days, partly due to the delay of the previous shuttle mission, 61C. The night before the Challenger launched, Florida was swept by a cold wave, leaving ice on the launch pad. On the 28th of January, the launch was initially scheduled for 9:38 am, but had to be postponed until 11:38 am due to the ice. After liftoff, the shuttle lasted for 73 seconds, reaching an altitude of 14,000 meters. Sadly, things took a turn for the worse, and this is when the shuttle tragically exploded, sending thrusters in 2 different directions, leaving a huge smoke trail. The most famous recording of this incident was captured by CNN, but there are many different recordings due to the amount of news stations filming at the time. 7 astronauts tragically lost their lives in this incident. It's also thought that the crew on the shuttle would have been alive for around 10 seconds after the explosion, meaning that they knew what was happening. After the crash, it was thought that the cold had severely affected certain parts of the shuttle. It had specifically affected the resiliency of 2 O-rings that had sealed the joint between the lower segments of the right solid rocket booster. On the same morning, an effect called joint rotation occurred, preventing the rings from resealing and created a small gap for hot exhaust gas to pass through. As the shuttle ascended, the leak expanded, which led to the erosion of the strut that secured the rocket to the tank carrying liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. When the strut eventually broke, the rocket's nose was forced through the tank, causing it to explode. Lee Harvey Oswald murder. Lee Harvey Oswald was a man behind JFK's assassination, which I previously spoke about earlier. Oswald was arrested at 1:45 p.m. the same day of JFK's murder at the Texas Theater. He was then transferred to Dallas Police Headquarters and kept in jail from the 21st of November to the 24th. After spending 3 days in jail there, Oswald was planned to be transferred to a county jail on the 24th. At 11:21 am, Oswald was being escorted from the prison to the armoured car that would take him to the county jail. Outside the jail was a crowd of people and news reporters, as everyone wanted to see the man responsible for the killing. Oswald was obviously hated by the crowd, and midway through walking he was shot in the abdomen. The crowd applauded when they realised he'd been shot. After the shooting, Oswald was taken to Parkland Memorial Hospital, which was the same hospital that JFK had been taken to 2 days prior. The man who shot Oswald was called Jack Ruby, and he was a Dallas nightclub owner. His motive was being distraught over JFK's death. He claimed he shot Oswald to save Jacqueline Kennedy the discomfiture of coming back to trial, and having to see Oswald again in court. This event was caught by a handful of news cameras, as there was multiple reporters outside the station. (9/11) I think most people on the planet know about this, so I'll keep it quick. On the 9th of September 2001, 2 planes were hijacked by terrorists from Al-Qaeda. 19 men from this group were responsible for the attack. Both planes were then flown into the World Trade Center buildings in New York. It is arguably the most shocking event in American history, and the biggest terrorist attack of all time. From the attacks on the Twin Towers alone, nearly 3,000 people were killed. There was also a 3rd plane that was hijacked that crashed in Pennsylvania, killing 40 people. This plane crashed due to the passengers attempting to take the plane back from the hijackers, but was flown into the ground to stop their attempt. There is only one known recording of the first plane hitting the Twin Towers, but countless videos of the second plane's impact exist, and were broadcast on national television. Shinzo Abe murder. Shinzo Abe was a former Prime Minister of Japan. He served as Prime Minister from 2006 to 2007. and from 2013 to 2020. His run as Prime Minister came to an end when he had to resign due to health concerns over colitis, a long-term disease where the colon becomes inflamed. Abe had had the condition for a while, but sometimes it would worsen. On the 8th of July 2022, Abe attended a democratic political event, hosted outside of Yamato Station in Nara City. Abe was delivering a speech for a Liberal Democrat Party candidate, when he was unexpectedly shot in the back at close range of a homemade firearm. He suffered a wound on the right side of his neck, his back, and had internal bleeding in his left chest. Abe was immediately taken to Nara City Hospital via helicopter. 4 hours of blood transfusions were performed on him, totaling to 20 litres of blood, but this still wasn't enough to save him. His killer was 41-year-old Tetsuya Yamagami. He claimed the reason he killed Abe was due to his connection with the Unification Church, a religious movement which was started in Seoul, South Korea in 1954. The church is famous for its mass wedding ceremonies where many couples get married at once. The church has also been criticised for its teachings and social influence, being called a dangerous cult. Since it began, it has grown to around 3 million members. Christine Chubbuck incident. Christine Chubbuck was a 29-year-old TV news reporter born in Hudson, Ohio. She transferred universities multiple times before ending up in Boston University and achieving her degree in broadcasting in 1965. Chubbuck had struggled with suicidal tendencies and depression her entire adult life, which her family attributed to being from a lack of intimate relationships. Chubbuck had told co-workers that she was a virgin at 29 years old and had only been on 2 dates with men. She also had to have her right ovary removed at 28 years old, and was told after the operation that if she didn't conceive a child within 3 months that she'd never be able to have kids. Chubbuck had planned to take her own life on TV, and had even joked about buying a gun and doing this with her colleague Rob Smith. On the 15th of July 1974, Chubbuck began the first 8 minutes of the program covering 3 national news stories and then a shooting in a restaurant from the previous day. During the coverage of the shooting, the reel presenting the footage of the restaurant jammed. Chubbuck changed subject from this story and said, I quote, "In keeping with the WXLT practice of presenting the most immediate and complete reports of local blood and guts news, TV40 presents what is believed to be a television first, in living colour and exclusive coverage of an attempted..." Chubbuck then withdrew a Smith & Wesson .36 revolver from her bag and placed it behind her right ear. Without hesitation, she then fired. The news station then quickly cut to a PSA, but it was too late, as thousands had already witnessed the shooting. Many people called the police about the incident, and many others called the station, as they were concerned about the incident and very shocked with what they saw. This was also the first time in history that someone had taken their own life on live TV. Tommy Cooper death. Tommy Cooper was a 63-year-old Welsh prop comedian and magician. His gimmick was to wear a red fez while performing. Before becoming an entertainer, Tommy served in the British Army for 7 years when he was younger. After leaving the army, he became a member of the Magic Circle, an organisation dedicated to promoting and advancing magic performance. Cooper started to pick up traction in the late 40s and ended up with his own show in 1948. Over time, Cooper became one of the most recognisable comedians in the world through his television work with London Weekend TV and Thames TV. But by the 1970s, alcohol had started to impact his career, as Cooper started to consistently turn up late to his shows and then rush through them while performing, which gave him a bad reputation amongst club owners. Cooper also had numerous medical conditions, including chronic indigestion, lumbago, sciatica, and bronchitis. Cooper was also a chain cigar smoker and an excessive drinker, which heavily contributed to the worsening of these conditions. After years of mistreating his body, Cooper's health started to decline. While performing at a show in Rome, he had a heart attack on stage, but survived. But this was a bad sign for what was to come. By 1980, his drinking had prevented Thames TV from giving him another series, so instead he stayed as a guest on other shows. On the 15th of April 1984, Cooper was midway through his act on a show called Live from Her Majesty's. Cooper was wearing a cloak which his assistant had helped put on. Whilst waiting for his assistant to help set up the act, Cooper suddenly collapsed backwards on the stage. His assistant thought it was a joke, along with the entire audience who were laughing. But it was no joke, as Cooper was actually having a heart attack. After a couple of seconds, Cooper lay there snorting and snoring on the floor. This is when things became more real, and people started to realise he wasn't joking. He was then dragged backstage through the curtain directly behind him, where efforts were made to revive him, but all failed. Cooper was then taken to Westminster Hospital, but pronounced dead on arrival. Millions of people watching this show live, so millions of people saw his death occur. Twilight Zone accident. The Twilight Zone is a sci-fi film being filmed in 1982. It's based on the idea that this zone appears and allows normal people to interact with supernatural and otherworldly beings. The film was split into 4 segments and had 4 directors, meaning each director would direct one segment. This incident happened during the filming of the first segment, whose director was John Landis. John Landis and his team had violated labour laws by hiring 7-year-old Micah Din Lee and 6-year-old Renee Shin Yi Chen to play 2 characters that are saved by Vic Morrow in the segment. John had also violated several more labour laws connected with others involved in this incident. This part of the first segment was set in the Vietnam War. Whilst filming in Santa Clarita, California, Morrow was set to carry both children out of a deserted village and across a shallow river whilst being pursued by American soldiers. For this scene there was a helicopter that was chasing them, and they were using a real helicopter to make the scene feel as real as possible. Dorsey Wingo, a Vietnam veteran, was the one who was piloting the helicopter during filming. Numerous explosion effects had been set up around the scene, and whilst filming, Dorsey positioned the helicopter 7.6 meters from the ground, and had rotated his helicopter 180 degrees for a shot. Due to timing issues, one of the explosive effects was set up at the wrong time, when Dorsey's helicopter was too close, causing the tail rotor to be blown off the helicopter. Immediately, the helicopter then spun out of control, but this happened when all 3 of the actors were underneath the helicopter crossing the river. The actors had no time to move and watched as the helicopter plummeted towards them. The helicopter crashed on top of them, killing all 3 of them almost instantly. From the autopsies, it showed that Morrow and Lee were decapitated by the blades of the helicopter, whilst Chen was crushed by the helicopter's landing skid. This accident was recorded from multiple different angles. Following the crash, there was a 9-month-long trial, where multiple team members were charged with their negligence on set. But, after 9 months, the charges for manslaughter were dropped, meaning there were no consequences for those responsible. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. It would mean the world to me if you could leave a like on this video, as it gives me a reason to make layer 2. This iceberg also has a total of 7 layers, so that means 7 parts if you guys enjoy it. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.